Every collector's path is different. Some of us hunt for the pristine, while others find beauty in the well-loved corners of a century-old card. Some of us collect what we know. Others dig deep into the research and the great hobby mysteries. But no matter the path, every journey starts in the same place, a love of the game. Welcome to the Love of the Game Auctions podcast. I'm your host, Crisafulli. On this show, we're going beyond the auction block to talk about the legends, the rarities, and the long-forgotten stories that make this hobby great. I'll be joined by guests who live and breathe sports, experts who help us see the hobby through a different lens. So if you value the lore as much as the score, you're in the right place. Let's go. Thanks for being here. I'm Crisafulli of Love of the Game Auctions, and today's episode starts not with a bat or a baseball card, but with a home in Connecticut where for a brief time, one of the most famous athletes in the world stayed as a guest. That athlete was Babe Ruth. Later in the show, we'll be joined by one of the foremost experts in baseball card history, someone who studies the cardboard that tells the stories of the game. But first, I want to tell you about Babe Ruth's stay with the Caselnova family and how a piece of that visit resurfaced decades later in a way that none of us could have predicted. Let's go. So the hobby knows that Babe Ruth baseballs are among the most popular items that there are. They're everywhere. Babe Ruth signed a million things during his career, and everybody knows that. But for whatever reason, the supply will never outpace the demand. Everybody wants a Babe Ruth ball. The problem with the fact that it's so popular is also that Babe Ruth's signature is among the most forged signatures in the hobby. I'm going to tell the story of a Babe Ruth ball that we sold almost a decade ago and how the ball was personalized to someone and how that personalization adds to the provenance of the ball and tells a great story all by itself. The ball was personalized to Big Kenneth Caselnova, and although balls are typically less valuable when they're personalized like that, in this case, it came with a letter of provenance from Kenneth Caselnova, who told a little bit of the story of how he got the baseball. Let's go back to 1946. Vito Caselnova was the golf chairman at the Longshore Country Club in Westport, Connecticut. In June of 1946, Babe Ruth played at a charity golf tournament there, and he stayed with the Caselnova family for an entire week. While he was there, he visited local firefighters at the hospital. He hung out with the Caselnova family. They had dinner parties, and he even made breakfast for the family. On the letter from Kenneth Caselnova, he says, "My parents spent the week having nightly dinner parties for Babe, Claire, and friends. In those days, the lady of the house still wore aprons when they cooked. I remember it as clear as if it was yesterday. Babe walking right up to my mother in the morning, taking off her apron, putting it on, and telling her, 'Move over, Mrs. C. The babe is making breakfast now.' Breakfast consisted of eggs, Canadian bacon, and toast." It's a pretty cool memory to have. He also said, on a little more of an ominous note, "I remember Babe pulling cans of Budweiser out of my parents' refrigerator, not to drink, but to subdue the headaches that he was experiencing in his eyes." By fall of 1946, Babe Ruth's face was swollen and he was unable to eat solid food. Later that year, he was diagnosed with the cancer that would ultimately take his life 2 years later. In this case, with this baseball, there's nothing amazing about the sale price at the time, but the story was great. What made it even better was that we posted about this story on our blog and on our website, and we received later an email from Robert Caselnova. He was Kenny's youngest brother, and he related more information about the visit. At the time of the visit, he was just 3 years old, but he said that Babe Ruth signed baseball gear, dozens of 8x10 photos, and a $5 bill that his mother carried with her entire life. He also autographed the headboard of Bobby's bed, which he still had at the time. It was about 5 years ago that he sent me that email and told me that he still had the headboard from his childhood signed by Babe Ruth. But the thing that struck me at the time was dozens of 8x10 photos of Babe Ruth. Can you imagine having dozens of signed Babe Ruth 8x10s today? That would be pretty amazing. And that's the story behind the sale. So my guest today is someone who doesn't just collect baseball cards, he studies them, he writes about them, and he helps shape how we understand them historically. Jason Schwartz is a nationally renowned baseball card expert whose work regularly appears in Collectibles on SI and the SABR Baseball Cards blog. He also serves as co-chair of the SABR Baseball Card Research Committee, which means when it comes to card history, authenticity, and context, he's one of the people doing the serious digging. He's a lifelong collector with a particular focus on Hank Aaron, Carl Hubble, Dwight Gooden, and Brooklyn Dodgers team sets. His Hank Aaron collection was recently featured in the Atlanta History Center's More Than Brave exhibit, and his baseball card themed artwork is currently on display at PNC Park and the Hannes Wagner Museum, which tells you this isn't just a hobby. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Oh man, that's an introduction.
Well, thanks for having some time for us and for joining us today. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
So tell us about your background. How'd you get into the hobby?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been doing it since about the age of 8. Really, the impetus was I started at a new school and wasn't great at making friends, but I noticed at recess, lunchtime, etc., almost all the boys in the class would trade baseball cards or show off their baseball cards, and I didn't have any, but I thought maybe that's the way to make friends, and it turned out it worked. Right, a lot of my best friends in elementary school, it came through baseball cards.
That's fantastic. Do you remember the first card that you got? Do you remember the first card that made an impression on you as a kid?
So I have to give kind of a funny answer here, because a lot of people start off being big fans of baseball, and then they open up a pack and they're hoping for certain players.
Right.
A kid today maybe is looking for Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge. When I bought my first packs of cards, it was just to make friends. I didn't know who any of the players were. I'd never watched a baseball game, but I did quickly find with this group of friends, this was growing up in LA in the 1970s, Steve Garvey was the guy. Right.
Okay.
And so, within a couple of days of hanging out with these guys, all of a sudden it was all about getting the Steve Garvey, which I finally did. Right. It took a lot of packs, but I got one. And so that's the first one that made a gigantic impression on me. But yeah, in my first pack, I wouldn't have known who a single person was.
It's funny. I still remember my first pack, 1977. My mother bought me a pack of baseball cards, and I had no idea. I mean, I knew baseball. I was a little baseball fan. I loved the Yankees, but I had no understanding of what were these things that she was handing me. What do I do with them? And she tried to explain, well, you collect the set. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't understand. But then I opened up the pack, and there was a Rod Carew in my first pack. And I remember thinking, oh, this is the guy. He's the best player. And I got him in this pack. I got and I could still picture the card. I was in the grocery store opening this pack, and I could still remember it. I still have the card. It's those early memories they just burn their way into your brain. That's just fantastic.
I was just going to add, it was really nice of Topps back then, and of course they still do it a bit, to put the All-Star banner, the All-Star emblem, or the All-Star rookie, because I told you I didn't know who anybody was, but if I got a card that said All-Star, or
he was good,
trophy, right? So there was probably a time I thought that Rick Burleson and Doug Alt were like two of the greatest players of all time.
I remember reading in a book early on that Topps assigned the card numbers. The better players had the card numbers ending in 0. So I remember looking always when I didn't know every player, because when we grew up there was no Sports Center, there was no 24-hour news, there was you had to learn about them by reading about them, and a lot of them I read about on their baseball cards, right? And so I would flip the cards over and look at the number and say, oh, he's a 0. He must be a good player. So this is how you wind up with those same kind of guys,
Early sabermetrics.
Right. Was there a card that you opened up that made you think at some point in your life that this was going to be more than just, a hobby for you? It was going to be more than just a thing that you did as a kid, that you were going to do it forever?
So I'm going to say not that I opened up out of a pack, but
okay.
As I was getting into cards and just became obsessed quickly. A friend of my mom's for my birthday got me what I think must have been the the second ever of the Sport Americana baseball card price guides.
Okay.
And there were a lot of advertisements, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
the advertisements, you could order cards or whatever. But there was one that had, for whatever reason, it had kind of a black and white picture of the 1959 Fleer Ted Williams card, How
Okay.
Ted Hit 400.
All right.
And I had no real context for the rest of the set or anything like that, right? I mean, that card probably for today's collectors wouldn't be their top choice.
Right.
But
Sure.
at any rate, there was something so captivating to me about the picture. I knew a little bit about the story of how he hit 400. And when I saw that card, right, I knew as a kid, right, as a 10-year-old kid or whatever, there was probably no way I could afford it, right? Even in the price guide, if it had said it was worth $2, I'm
Right.
out. I don't know that kind of
Sure.
money.
Yeah.
So it was essentially then that I was like, man, when I'm a grown up and I have a job and I can do whatever I want with my money, I'm going to get this card, right? And
Uh-huh.
it was kind of like this dream quest,
Uh-huh.
ahead of me for the longest time. Of course, I finally did get it.
I was going to ask, do you have one? Yeah.
I did. I had the set.
That's great. That's great. So your collecting focuses heavily on Hank Aaron. What is it about Hank Aaron?
I'm going to go back to when I was a kid on that as well, right? And so I mentioned, I started in '78, got pretty big into all of this pretty quick. But
Right.
there were kids I was friends with that had, usually it was an older brother or a cousin, that got sick of their cards and handed them down. And so every now and then you'd have these 1975 or 1976 cards make an appearance on the schoolyard.
Yep.
So I had friends that had cards of Hank Aaron. And there's something weird, this is just how time passes. When it's 1979 and somebody has a card from 1976, it seems like it's 100 years
Yeah.
old.
It's
When you're a kid anyways,
Yep.
right? When you're a kid.
For sure.
So it was like this thing like, oh my God, people can have baseball cards of Hank Aaron. And I've read enough books to know this is the home run king. Now, of course, back then, right, early sabermetrics, although not far off from the truth, I know this guy's got the most home runs. So I just figure he's the greatest player of all time.
Right.
And so once I got to the point, I managed to make a trade. I got a 76. I started going to card shows. I got like a 75 and a 74. At some point, I just became obsessed with the idea that someday I might collect his whole career. Right.
Uh-huh.
I got to fast forward to college. I figured out if I didn't buy textbooks for 3 of my classes, I could buy his rookie card at the card show, which is what I did.
Wow.
Got a pretty bad report card, but I got the Hank Aaron rookie. So no regret.
Nice.
And as an adult, right? I mean, the more I learned about his life, right? As a kid, you know him for the home runs and the record, but as you learn about him, as you get a little older, you come to understand like just the absolute humble beginnings that he rose from.
Yeah.
Right. The challenges, kind of the social climate for, breaking Babe Ruth's record, and you just, at this point, if somebody says, picture any human being from any walk of life who just exudes tremendous character, right? He's one of the first people I picture, right? And so he's a true hero. And so, it just stuck, but the love really came from the very beginning.
Wow. Did you ever have an opportunity to meet him?
I did, yeah. So twice.
What was that like?
One of the earlier card shows I was at, there was Frank Robinson signing for $2 and Hank Aaron signing for $6. And don't ask me where I got $8, but I got to meet both these guys and they signed 8x10s. And then much more recently, back in 2017, the Brewers hosted an event, a fundraiser. And I had been pestering every week, hey, is Hank Aaron going to do this thing? It was one of these things that sells out quickly, but somebody in the Brewers ticket office, I guess noticed that I was pestering pretty much every day. So they said, listen, we're just going to tell you right before we post it. Okay. So you can stop bugging us every day. And so I managed to get a ticket. My wife and I went there. I told her, we got to be early. We got to be early to get a good seat. We waited outside the locked fences to the stadium, right? Because we were way too early. We were the first car through, right? I parked as close as I could. We run in, find the room. And of course, we're the first people there. And I was like, wow, where do we sit? They go, wherever you want. So, we pulled up right at the stage and there's Hank Aaron, 3 feet from us for an hour and a half telling stories. So
no kidding.
The time.
Wow. So it wasn't a, I know I hear a lot of these don't meet your idols kind of thing where it's a disappointment. So it sounds to me like your experience with him was everything that you hoped it would be.
If I were building a Mount Rushmore of the 4 greatest Americans ever, he'd be on it. So
Wow.
yeah, no disappointment at all. It's just the opposite. You're like, wow, this guy's way more incredible than I thought.
How
Just
about
a
that?
really kind, gentle, wise person. And of course, I mean, the baseball achievements are off the charts.
Sure.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know that anybody could say a bad word about Hank Aaron.
I've never heard a bad thing.
Same.
It's funny. I had the opportunity to meet Frank Robinson, who I think is the most underrated Hall of Famer. I think Frank Robinson is Superman,
I think I'm with you.
and so his achievements blow my mind, and relative to the recognition he gets for it.
Yeah.
And I found that when I had the opportunity to meet him, I met him in kind of a weird context, and he was lovely, and he's just a nice, gentle guy, and which I thought was, it was great. So it was. It was something that'll stick with me for a long time, I think.
I'm gonna challenge you on this because you're in the business. You're in the business, and I think what I'm telling you is true. How is it a player as great as Frank Robinson? There I go. I'm almost stuck with Hank Aaron. A player as great as Frank Robinson, also a history-making manager, you can get in pretty nice shape a card of his more than 50 years old right now on eBay,
Yeah.
probably for $3.
It's insane. I've been interviewed several times with these, like, what do you think is the most undervalued thing in the hobby? Those kind of interviews. My
Yeah.
answer is always the same. It's always Frank Robinson. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
He was fourth on the home run list when he retired. He won the Triple Crown in both. He won the Triple Crown. He won the MVP in both leagues. His first black manager, first black executive. This is a guy who built a monster career and was Superman. I mean, he was Superman, and yet, when you can go out and buy his rookie card for a couple $100 in collector grade, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's and again, he's among those players who, just the social difficulties of being who he was is astonishing to me. Being able to, like, get up every day and be a professional athlete in that climate in the 50s, when black players were not, still not really accepted. There was still not every team had a black player when Frank Robinson broke in. It's amazing to me. So anyway, yeah, there's a hot button for me. Is Frank
I'm
Robinson.
right there with you.
Yeah.
I'm right there. The hobby is broken. There, that's my soundbite. The hobby is broken.
Agree.
75 Frank Robinson for $3.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you're not just collecting; you research and you write about cards at a very deep level. What's a thing that you think that collectors think they know about vintage cards, but they consistently get wrong?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I could just go right back to Frank Robinson, right?
Yeah.
Why don't they want cards more? But I may go to one that's a little bit of a lightning rod, right, for some of your audience. But for me, I think the hill I die on when it comes to vintage is I am 100% in the 1949 Leaf camp. I used to be in the 48-49 with the hyphen. As a kid, I knew it as 48. I think because of that price cut I had.
Sure.
But I think the evidence is so incontrovertible for it being a purely 1949 issue.
49.
That's the hill I die on. And it's not total trivia because things like Jackie Robinson's rookie card, Warren Spahn's rookie card, Larry Doby's rookie card hang in the balance, right? I mean, the rookie crop is insane. And there are some that the set loses, like for anybody that would consider the Leaf Stan Musial a rookie. Well, there's clearly 48 Bowman. And then your customers know about even older Stan Musial.
Right, propagandas and there's a lot of them. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a few that the Leaf set would lose, and that can be frustrating to people that really saved up to grab those. And then there are a few where the precedence of Leaf over Bowman turns into a tie. Jackie Robinson would be an example there. If somebody thought Leaf was uniquely his rookie, well, it's 49 and so is Bowman. So that's one that I come back to a lot. But it's really been in the past year, right? I used to have a lot of interest in it and see a lot of good arguments and collectors with recollections of the cards coming out in the spring of 1949, but how trustworthy are the recollections that are 60 years old? But it was really just in the past year. There was that great book on Leaf that just came out by Brian Capel. And then my friend John Racanelli from SABR pulled the original legal papers from the Cook County Courthouse,
Oh,
where I think it was Marshall Leaf who swore under oath that the very first 1949 Leaf cards, or pardon me, the very first Leaf cards, he didn't give a year, were shipped in April of 1949.
wow. I
Direct
was not
quote
aware of that at
filed
all.
from the source. Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, lore and tradition are strong in the hobby. So I wouldn't
Sure.
expect an overnight switch. And I know sometimes we'll still call a set something. Case in point, 2025 Stadium Club that just came out last week. We'll call it
Yeah.
2025 rather than 2026.
Right.
So sometimes the year is just a name, but I do think this one has implications in things that many collectors care about a lot. And so I
Sure.
think having that information is important.
That's pretty great. So let's talk about SABR for the uninitiated. Let's start at the high level. Tell us about SABR? What is SABR? What do they do?
Yeah, fantastic. So probably the simplest way to talk about SABR is that it's kind of a big tent for everyone who loves baseball.
Okay.
And I want to emphasize for a lot of people out there, if they've heard of SABR, almost their first association maybe came from Bill James or came from all of a sudden having, you know, these hitters that bat 210 but walk a lot and hit homers, making baseball boring, right?
Right.
So there's definitely the analytics and statistical side. That is a huge part of SABR,
Sure.
but it's not the only part, right? I got in just because I love baseball cards. There are other people that get in just because they love women in baseball, just because they love the Negro Leagues, because they love baseball artwork, right?
Right.
There's so many avenues in, right? Baseball photography, going to ball games, keeping score, right? So if you love baseball a little more than the next person down the block, there's a place for you in SABR because you're just going to be surrounded by other people like that. And some of them are going to be, you know, the stats people, and
Sure.
you know, they're still fun to talk to. But the point is, you know, if you love baseball because of X, Y, and Z, you're going to be surrounded by another, you know, 150 people with those same interests, and you can just listen to them all day long.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. My first exposure to SABR was one of those stats guys who went deep into explaining why Ron Fairley was one of the best players of the 70s, and it was hard for me to swallow, you know, but you know, today when I have, you know, I work in baseball really, to be able to see all of the different places where SABR is benefiting the publications and the meetings and all of that stuff is just amazing. And yeah, there is a place for everybody. It's, you know, it's something where, you know, it's important to me that Love of the Game always keeps a SABR membership. You know, I feel like the research that you do that shows up in the player bios on Baseball Reference alone is worth just being a member, just as a, you know, because you're funded by memberships. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's some donations as well, but I think it's mainly memberships, the conference that we have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Makes sense. So now let's talk about the SABR Baseball Cards Research Committee.
Okay.
As you know, tell us about that and what did it spring out of and what do you do?
Yeah, good timing. This is actually our 10th anniversary. It turns out.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it predates me. I should emphasize that, but it was founded in 2016.
Okay.
Chris Dial and Mark Armour are the two members that founded it, and then May 2019, they handed off leadership to myself and Nick Vosbrink. So we've been doing it ever since, and we've got some great vice chairs. I know you know Matthew Glidden pretty well. He's one of ours, for example.
Yep.
But the Baseball Cards Research Committee, I don't want to say it's a misnomer, because we do like baseball cards research and we do some, but it's not all we do, right? Okay. A little bit like SABR. They're sort of more than first meets the eye. So with the Baseball Cards Research Committee, I'm going to say first and foremost, it's a community, right? It's where the baseball card collectors congregate. And sometimes that means virtually, right? Whether in social media feeds, or you know, email announcement type things. And other times it's actual meetups, like at the national, or sometimes local chapter-based meetups. Like I've got a little crew in Chicago that I get together with a lot. All guys I met through SABR. But our main sort of work output is our blog, SABRBaseballCards.blog, and that's really going to be mixed. Sometimes you're going to see things that reflect true research, and I would say new understandings about certain cards or sets. Now, that's not every day of the week.
Sure.
Often you're going to find, if somebody says, "Oh, Jason Schwartz, let me see if he wrote anything cool for Saber." Well, they might find my article on how I really love the 1980 Topps Manny Mota card. You know what I mean? So it's a mix, right? Sometimes it's just personal reflections, essays about a love of collecting, position pieces on why the 1973 top set is their ugliest one ever. So not everything is pure research, but there's
Right.
certainly enough research there to sort of keep the R in our name.
Yeah, that's pretty great. What kind of detective work are you doing right now? Are you, I know you said that the things you publish are all across the board, but is there anything in particular that you're working on now that you're pumped about?
Yeah, I would say so. Is it okay to get a little bit into the weeds? I'm guessing your audience is probably
In the
already in the weeds.
weeds. Yeah, yeah. They probably all know you personally. So yeah.
Right. So something I became really captivated with over the past couple of years, and I always thought one of these days I want to dig in, and I finally did, was this notion of the T206 print groups, right? So I'm going to
Okay.
oversimplify a little bit,
Mhm.
but I'll say conventionally there are 6 recognized print groups. I'm going to ignore the 2 most complicated ones and say that the first 4 can easily be thought of as the set coming out in waves. Here's the first 150 or so cards in the set. Here's the next 200 or so cards in the set, and then here's another little group, and here's another little group. So the set evolved right over this 3-year period in
Right.
these distinct waves or print groups. And so, thanks to your colleague Andrew Ehrenstein, right? I had no tobacco cards when I met him, and he kept kind of nudging me. So I finally collected the Brooklyn team set. And
Okay.
when I organized by print groups, there was a really interesting pattern, which was, the first print group, as it turns out, for Brooklyn is something like, 12 guys, just 12 different guys, no duplicates of any player. The second print group added 5 brand new players, no alternate poses of anybody already there. The third print group added 5 alternate poses of guys already there, but no new players. And then the final print group did a little bit of each, right?
Okay.
And so I just thought that was something kind of peculiar with just the Brooklyn team set. And I thought, it would take forever to figure this out for all the sets, for all the teams, I should say. Well, I finally did it for all
You
16
did it.
major
Yeah.
league teams. I built these sort of visual checklists where you could really see how the team sets evolved for all 16 major league teams. And sure enough, and there were tiny exceptions, but what I found was the second print group was almost exclusively all new players. There were very, very few exceptions.
Okay.
The third print group was almost entirely alternate poses for existing players. In fact, there were only 4 cards introduced in that print group that brought a new player into the set. So
Huh.
this was, for me, I'm still kind of like putting together some of my presentation around it. But
Wow.
for me, this was like incredible because I thought I had read almost everything I could about the set and the print groups. And groups 2 and 3 have this sort of surprisingly common sense interpretation that I think really gives you insight into how the set was built. But for whatever reason, in any of the reading I've done, I'd never run across these characterizations. But once you, maybe because nobody wanted to do quite as much work as it took me to do, but that's something you can tell. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Wow, I almost feel like I've solved some mystery about the set. Maybe nobody thought to,
It's
keep
interesting
that
because
around.
it's a set that's been so widely researched and so heavily studied, and I'm surprised that this is not a thing, that I've heard before. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think with like you say, I mean, it's probably the most studied set in the history of the hobby across all sports.
Sure.
So it wouldn't shock me if somewhere back in the day somebody just sort of knew it from how they
Knew it.
sorted the cards. But in terms of what's published and what's out there, I just couldn't find it anywhere. So
Yeah.
when I first wrote my little article for Saber Baseball Cards, I thought, somebody's going to point me to something from 25 years ago with the same information. But
Right.
the longer it was out there, the more I became convinced that it just didn't seem to be out there otherwise.
Fascinating. So that kind of gets us on topic for one of the things that I was hoping that we would cover today is the knowledge of the hobby, and this comment that you just made about how um, you wouldn't be surprised if somewhere along the line somebody had figured that out, and it's just dropped out of the collective consciousness of whoever, just because of time, and that's what happens with time when things are not written down, and we have this resource that, and I've been writing about this for more than a year now, that has always served, as long as I've been a collector, as sort of the Bible for the hobby, and that's the standard catalog. And that is, for a lot of people, it's a newsstand publication, but it's also something that you're able to order by mail, and that's the Bible for a lot of people who started collecting post 1970, say, right? And you know whenever they started, I don't know when they started publishing it, but that was the book. And when, in the course of my own research, when I would discover something new, some new discovery about a set, some weird variation, something like that, I would send it to Bob Lemke, and Bob would review my research and determine whether or not that was a legitimate thing, a legitimate discovery, and then add it to the standard catalog. So that was kind of the clearinghouse for that sort of stuff. The last issue of the standard catalog was published in 2017. And since then, it's not like these new discoveries have stopped happening. We've made some. And I'm sure that there are folks in the hobby who do a lot more research than we do, who have also made discoveries like that, and they just vanish into the ether. So what I have been saying is that the right place to recreate the standard catalog is with the SABR Baseball Cards Research Committee. It makes sense. It's an organization that doesn't exist for profit. It's already there. It's already got some of the greatest researchers that in the hobby. And so I've always said, or since I've taken up this crusade, I've been saying SABR is the place to go. Now, it seems like I'm seeing some actual motion, some movement in that area. Can you bring us up to speed a little bit?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, the first thing I'll say is you were so right. So I did take a little bit of a collecting break, and when I got back into it in 2014, I was pretty old school. I didn't realize how much was on the internet, so I went and ordered the standard catalog,
Sure.
and it was like the greatest thing.
Right.
And even today, in some dystopian future we don't want, if all baseball card knowledge were to be obliterated and you could only save one thing, website, book, whatever, it would literally be just grab the most recent one of those, and we can hopefully rebuild everything else over time.
For sure.
Incredibly valuable. So yeah, we have talked about it a little bit at SABR, inspired by you. I'll mention that, right? I think
thank you.
The seed for us. But yeah, I mean, a lot of us miss that. A lot of us wish it was updated. A lot of us have been in situations where we'll see something like in the standard catalog. I was looking at, I think it was 1903 Bryce Williams, and it had forgot exactly how many cards were in the set, but it indicated, due to the rarity of the set, it may be that this checklist is not complete, right? Well, I thought to myself, well, my edition of the standard catalog is now over 10 years old. I wonder if somebody's discovered any new ones since then. Well, how would I know? Right? Where would I look? So, so I'm definitely with you. I'd say the ringleader of the progress that we're making slowly, right? As someone well, I mentioned him already, Matthew Glidden. As a first step, I think what he felt like would be useful would be a bit of a survey, because if we think about the standard catalog, certainly the edition I have, and I'm assuming probably previous ones were similar, it does a couple things. Number one, it's just an incredible collection of baseball card knowledge in terms of checklists, these really valuable but brief descriptions of each set, right? But then it also has prices, right? And for me personally, I don't need to see the prices. And of course, when you publish something with prices, it's out of date pretty quick.
As soon as it comes out, right?
Basically the day it comes out. So unless you decide every day you're going to sit there and try to update the electronic version. Good luck, right? So there are just certain things like, in terms of the sorts of folks that might help work on it or the sorts of folks that might use it the most, what would they be looking for? Would they care about prices? Would they need it to sort of declare, what Jackie Robinson's rookie card is? Or
Yeah.
could we sort of leave that to others and just focus on here's the set, here's a little bit about it, and here's the checklist? Would it need to identify certain cards as being rarer than others? So these are all
That
questions, right? I mean, from my perspective, and I don't mean to think small, but from my perspective, if you just had the set, the description, and the checklist, and there was a way for that checklist to be updated when there was a new discovery, like I would pay a lot for
yeah.
that book, that online resource. Everything else to me is icing on the cake. Either I wouldn't need it at all, or I'd like it, but it'd never be a showstopper.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about rookie cards. Pricing, I wouldn't expect to see. I mean, if somebody did the work, it wouldn't bother me. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It always felt like to me that the actual price, what the number is, never really mattered to me in the standard cat. I didn't care. Where it was helpful was seeing, this variation is worth this much relative to the regular card, or this is the single printed card and it's worth this multiple of the regular common, that kind of thing, or in the set where there is, one ridiculous rarity, like how ridiculous a rarity is it? Is every card worth $10 and the rarity is worth 10,000, or is every card worth $10 and the rarity is worth $12? So I use the pricing information for that sort of, let's establish how important is this card really. But I never used it to say, oh, well, this Nolan Ryan is worth a nickel. That it's just never, like you said, it's gone as soon as it's out of date as soon as you have it.
You make a perfect point, because I mean, if somebody, God bless them, it's going to take some deep pockets. But if somebody's trying to collect the 1933 Gaudy set, we'd want them to know that card 106 is not your typical Hall of Famer, right?
Right.
Or God forbid, 1923 Maple Crispet. Watch out for that Casey Stengel.
Casey Stengel, right? Yeah.
Be one known in the world, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think you make a good point. There's, on some level, you'd want that knowledge. I know when I started on my T205 Brooklyn set, I went in not really knowing that Kaiser Wilhelm was going to cost me more than all my other cards combined.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in a way, I'm glad I didn't know, because I probably wouldn't have taken it on. Right. Once I finally got to the point that I had everybody but Kaiser, I finally, found one that a mouse had eaten the corner off of, and there you go. I got my set. But yeah, you're right. There's certain information you'd want, and if the pricing information's there, then you can use it exactly in that way. You can say it might not be current, but I can at least identify the really, really, sort of relatively valuable cards for the set. So, maybe some designator like SP and SSP, I don't
I found it valuable a lot of times on sets that I don't know anything about, when something comes in from some PCL set that I've never seen before, or some, oddball issue that I didn't even know existed. When I dig into that one and I say, okay, every one of these cards is worth $300, but this guy is worth $1,200. Why is that? He's not somebody I've ever heard of. What is it about that guy that makes him special? Oh, well, that was a chase card, or that was, and digging in a little bit, it gives me a reason to dig in a little bit and understand better why is this card more valuable than the others. But again, not to beat a dead horse, but what is the actual pricing? There's so many resources for that are updated daily, that are updated by transaction on eBay. Why do we need a printed document that says the same thing? But I can't even tell you, even today, how many times I refer back to who manufactured it, how is it distributed, what is the actual size that the card should be, that kind of stuff. Was this printed on, does this have a gloss? Was this printed on thin paper? Was it, all of that information is so valuable. Even today, to me as an auctioneer, as I'm writing descriptions, I dig into those standard catalog descriptions, and sometimes I think, geez, we think we know what this is, but this hasn't been published in a decade. I wonder if knowledge has changed on this set, and there's really not a way to know. So I think SABR would be perfect for that. And I think there's some homework that needs to be done. I don't know if anybody at SABR, I don't know the answer to this, who actually owns the standard catalog, right? Because my digging into it a little bit, it could be one of two companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did anybody ever figure out who owns it?
No, because I sent out a few, cold emails to address.
Yeah, they don't respond. Yeah,
nobody got back to me.
Yeah,
right.
they all have the same. Whoa, do we own it? Do you? It's weird. So
it made me think, instead of asking the question, I should have said, just so you know, we're planning to use all the information out of your book, permission free, unless we hear from you in the next 90 days. Right.
It's not the worst. Yeah.
Right back. We're like, nice.
Yeah. That's not the worst idea. You'll hear from the legal department in 15 minutes. You said that out.
While we're on the subject, though, let me tell you 3 things that I think we could improve. Right. Because I know I started off by talking about things we could take away, right, to make it less work. But number 1, right, as far as I know, there was never an electronic version. So let's pretend all I have is the thick book. And I want to know every set that Knapp Rucker has appeared in. Yeah. Good luck. I have to thumb through 3,000 pages, right? Uh-huh. Whereas if we have it electronically, right?
Sure.
You do a quick search and it's like, oh wow, here's all the Knapp Rucker cards I can collect. Number 2 and 3, they're sort of the same. My recollection is that it's either thin or has nothing when it comes to, let's say, the vintage Japanese and Latin American issues that you've seen have just exploded in popularity.
Yep.
Right. Maybe it's a second thinner guide. I don't know, but on a certain level, why not? Right. That would be a nice thing to have all in one place.
Absolutely. The Caribbean cards and like you said, the Japanese cards are just taking off in ways that I can't. I'm thrilled about it. I think it's great. I also think that there are issues that we don't know about. I have one. I'm sitting on one that is sitting. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I'm not going to talk about what it is yet because I don't know what it is yet. But every expert that I've shown them to has been like, "Oh yeah, that's this," and they kind of give me what information you could glean just by looking at the card, and you say, "What? Oh yeah, that's this." I know that's what it is. What else can you tell me? And so it's having some resource for that stuff is really imperative. There's some stuff out there, but consolidating it all in one place is pretty great.
Yeah. And your secret's safe with me. I'm not going to tell anybody that you have the 1912 St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys paper. Let's not get
yes. It's keep that quiet. Don't let anybody know. So on a similar note, I read, and this is something that comes up almost every time there's some controversy that happens in the hobby. I see this or some version of this posted somewhere where somebody says, we really need an industry association. We really need some group that's job it is to vet companies for their ethics and to establish some sort of policies that companies should abide by if they want the good housekeeping seal of approval. And I've actually been in meetings with collectors and auction house representatives over the years who have tried to do that. It's very difficult to do that. The first time I did it, I sat in a room with some collectors, and then somebody came into the room and joined us who was like a legendary bad guy had no business being in the room, and sat down and started talking about what he thought that the organization should do. And it was like, okay, I'm going to go home. You're here, I'm leaving. And so, I feel like lately, every time I see that concept brought up, I think, well, SABR It's there. It exists. It's a nonprofit. It's not affiliated with any auction house or grading company or message board or anything like that. It's an organization that exists independently and it is managed by some of the most knowledgeable card guys there are out there. So why doesn't Saber take some kind of a role like that? Is that something you could see happening?
I'll give you the short version. I mean, I think it would be a good thing in the hobby. But
Yeah,
when you say why doesn't Saber take something like this on, it may be a rhetorical question. But the
yeah,
first
it
thing that
kind of
popped into
is.
my head was because it's work, Al. It's work. We do this for fun, right?
Why don't you
But,
do it?
yeah, but I mean, like in all seriousness, if there were, we'll call it a Saber baseball card seal of approval, right?
Right,
It almost feels like every week there's a new grading company, right?
right,
Or there are a lot of groups that do what you do, not as well, but it's sort of like the list
that's
is
kind of
long,
you.
right? The list is
Hmm.
long, and if somebody said to me, Jason, can your team go out and check out Auction House X, right?
Right,
It's a little hard to know, like, where would we start, right? I mean, there'd be people that might say, oh, I bought three things and had a great experience. And if somebody else said, oh, not me, I got totally burned, right?
right,
I
right.
guess there's that. But there's probably, I mean, there are people smarter than me about this that could probably turn that into a feasible initiative. But the way it at first hits me, it feels like, wow, that would be a lot of work, and our little army is just
Right.
volunteers that do things for fun. Um,
I live in this idea that somewhere there is a better business bureau type of an organization that can tell collectors you should not be buying from that company, or this company is very highly rated and they're fine, and not necessarily in a judgmental way, like I don't like your policies, so I'm going to give you an F on this, but more of a way that, like, there's a resource that can help to resolve problems on the consumer side. So, like, I buy something from an auction house and it's fake, right? If I go back to that auction house and say, "Hey, I bought this thing. It's fake," they could just say, "Oh no, it's not. It's real." Everything is as is. Everything you buy in the auction is as is. Or you could go to the Better Business Bureau and say, "Hey, I bought this thing," and they won't help me. They won't give me a refund. They won't do anything. And the Better Business Bureau says, "Okay, well, we're going to try and resolve this problem for you, and if we can't, then they get a little check mark on their record, and x number of issues, and they get a poor rating, something like that." Yeah, there's a lot of work there. I could, as I'm sitting here and I'm talking through it out loud, it's really cool of me to give you that job to do.
as a member of Saber, right?
Right.
You could lead the initiative.
I could start
Um,
that, but I
so,
can't because there's a conflict of interest.
no, I know. Yeah, I would say, I mean, so this is really just gut reaction, right? Not having thought about it very much at all. Because there may be Saber Baseball Cards members that listen to this and say, Jason, what? Why didn't you say
I'll
yes?
do it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, my initial thinking is, I'm sure we have members that would really enjoy sort of being part of something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know organizationally at the leadership level, if the organization would say, yes, that whole thing will be us, right? Because that's kind of
Yeah.
a bigger, broader commitment.
Right. Sure.
But I know we would have people who would be good at that sort of thing and could certainly be part of it, right? In
Yeah.
terms of whether they would lead it or be the whole thing is probably the big question mark.
I feel so strongly about Saber as an organization and the committee in particular as a resource that is so underutilized by baseball fans and by hobby people, and I think some of it is an awareness thing. Some of it might be an intimidation thing. I don't know. Like, sometimes I'll hear people who are better educated about baseball than I am. I'll hear them talking about some stat. Well, you can't. This player's no good. His whatever is third worst in the league, and I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. SABR is way over my head, and I can't. And that's the conclusion I wind up drawing from something like
Yep.
that.
Oh,
Analytics has gone too far. I don't understand it anymore, and so I would rather just look at batting average and home runs and RBIs and judge players that way. And I could never join SABR. And so I think, like, talking a little bit about like what you were saying today. You wrote an article about how you like the 1980 Topps Manny Mota card, like that humanizes it a little bit more, I think, such
yeah.
a valuable organization and so important.
I appreciate it.
Couple of quick ones before we wrap up. Number one, you can own one card, no budget. Budget doesn't matter. One card with no competition, no limits to price, whatever it is. What is your dream card?
Wow. Okay. So I could pick something that I know I'll never own because even if it was out there, there's no way I could afford it. But I'm going to pick something that I think if the right one, came across my feed, I would buy it. And
Okay.
that is top of my want list now for the last few years, 1950 Higgs Dairy, Pacific Coast League, Kenny Washington. So barrier breaking football player, but he was actually with the Los Angeles Angels PCL team really for a week and a half, 2 weeks, but happened to be there on picture day. So the Higgs Dairy cards, right? If Jason did the standard catalog, nobody would know this. But for Higgs Dairy, right, the truth is, if you didn't play in San Diego, your cards are already a little rarer, I think, than the Padres in 1950. So any non-Padre tends to be a little tougher. But boy, oh boy, ever since I've been looking, I've never seen one come up, right? And so it's one of those things where I think if I ever see one, it might be the only one I ever see. Meaning, if I had to sell my car to buy it, I'd probably do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
pretty
anyone,
cool.
if you've got one out there, that's your license to get in touch and triple the price. I'm there.
He's going to sell his car.
Yeah.
All right. So for people interested in learning more about SABR or about joining the Baseball Cards Research Committee, how can they find you and how do they do that?
Yeah, fantastic. So our website's an easy one. It's just SABR.org, right? SABR.org. And if you do /join, it gives the information on how to join. It's a pretty cheap membership. I didn't even talk about all the crazy research resources you get for free, like newspapers.com and digital sporting news all the way back to the 1880s, right? I mean, it's insane. You can pull up those old ads for T206, like with the little picture of the Wagner. That's in our free resources. You can print out the whole issue if you want. So anyways, SABR.org is the site, SABR.org/join, right? If you're specifically interested in baseball cards, whether you're a member or not, you can go to SABRBaseballCards.blog to read our latest articles. We've got about 800 things there. Also, even if you're not a member, we have a Facebook group called SABR Baseball Cards, and we have a Blue Sky feed called SABR BB Cards, right? BB for baseball, but SABR BB Cards, or a brevity thing on Blue Sky, I guess. Finally, though, I mean, if you are a member, because this is currently a rule, that we adhere to, if you want to write for our blog, which is great, you have to be a member. But if you are a member, we absolutely want you to write for the blog, right? Whether you've done deep research into Maple Crispat, or whether you just want to tell us why you always loved the 1979 Topps Mick Kelleher card, that's fine too, right? We always love new authors. All you have to do is join, and then we'll walk you through what to do on that.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. We close every episode with the same question. And so I'm going to ask this to you. And I don't want you to spend a lot of time thinking about it. I just want you to hit me with the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay. What is the single thing, the single event or game or something that made you fall in love with the game?
Shoot, I kind of covered it. 78 Topps Steve Garvey. It was like instant ticket to friends, right? I felt so lucky once I pulled that card. Like, it was a card I slept with. I carried it in my pocket all over the place, right? Eventually I got doubles and triples and quadruples.
I'm welling up. That's amazing.
This was, so you're the right age. When Star Wars came out in 1977,
sure,
it wasn't just that you saw it. Like, there'd be friends at school. How many times have you seen Star Wars? And they'd say, I've seen it 11 times, right? That's literally the very next year. It wasn't Star Wars. It was, how many 1978 Steve Garveys do you have, right? And you wanted to be able to say, I have 6, right? Like, the more you had, the cooler you were.
That's unreal.
I mean, that's the card. Like that for me. Like I went to this new school. I had no self-confidence. I had no friends. I don't know what path I would have been on in life. But this card, I felt like I was king of the school, right? I had confidence. I
Uh-huh.
had friends. And I loved all my time at that new school from the day I got the Garvey.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there were great teachers too. Shout out Miss Pollup if you're listening, Mr. Litwack, rest in peace. There were great teachers, but I mean, it was literally the baseball cards just opened all the doors for me, especially Garvey.
All right. So we've done 3 episodes of this podcast today. We've recorded 3 different episodes, 3
Oh man,
different interviews.
Iron Man,
That
right?
that little segment, that little bit right there, best of the 3. That was
Oh man,
unbelievable. Instant ticket to Friends is I mean, that is the greatest thing, man. Thank you so much for being with us. That was excellent. It's always good to see you and to hear your voice, and I really appreciate you taking time with us. Thanks.